Lundy, and you're watching the Hunter Lundy for the People podcast. In each episode, I engage in meaningful conversations with influential personalities spanning across government, faith, education, sports, and beyond. Together, we dive into some of society's most pressing topics, actively seeking faith-based solutions that empower our community. To support the podcast and subscribe with hunterlundy.com and follow us at Hunter W. Lundy on all social media. I want to thank you for our sponsors. God bless.
Good afternoon. This is Hunter Lundy. I'm here today with Dr. Michael Goldberg. In the fall of last year, I did an interview with Dr. Goldberg, and he's a well-known pediatric physician and research scientist who's really developed a program called the Neuroimmune Dysfunction Syndrome Program. He graduated from UCLA Medical School and completed his pediatric internship and residency at USC Medical Center. He's been in private practice for years, but Dr. Goldberg has specialized in treating immune dysregulation and neurocognitive disorders, focusing on chronic fatigue syndrome and ADHD in both children and adults. His research is extended into understanding the neurocognitive link between children with autism, PDD, and the family members, siblings and parents with ADHD or CFIDS. Dr. Goldberg continues working with other researchers to accelerate the identification of new therapeutic modalities for these neuroimmune dysfunctions. And of course, we're all concerned about our children in this country and around the world today, more so than ever because of the autism rates. I had the privilege of last fall meeting Dr. Goldberg's wife, Elise, on an airline flight. And I learned that Elise is as well as a co-author of this great book that they wrote called The Myth of Autism. I encourage everybody to go find it, go read it, and get an understanding of what all of this medical practice and research has revealed about the problem that we see today in the world with autism. Because we know that at one point in time, autism was 1 in 10,000, and today it's like 1 in 36 in children. And it's a problem. We also know today that we have a Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has really delved into this subject matter and he's delved into the health of the American people. He's stated publicly, and I agree. I don't know what Dr. Goldberg feels about it, but we're one of the most unhealthy nations in the world today. I live in the state of Louisiana. We're the most unhealthy state. We're one of the most obese states. We have one of the highest rates of disease, chronic disease, as well as diabetes in Louisiana than any other state in the country. And then, of course, when we're the worst in the world, Louisiana's bad off. So we're really focusing on these issues. And I had this privilege of having a long conversation with Elise, Dr. Goldberg's wife, which led to our interview of Dr. Goldberg last fall. And we were unable to complete the interview, and a lot has transpired in that time. And I'm just honored today that Dr. Goldberg has agreed to come back on the podcast, come back on the show, and answer some questions. But Dr. Goldberg has contributed to numerous academic and medical publications, some of which include anterior temporal lobe, social brain and the human frontal lobes, ADHD, artistic savants, neurospec, which is a testing method that he's going to talk about today, but things that the medical community has just not delved into. And so he's part of what we call medical research as well as a treater. And the missing part that we have today is medical research. The pharmaceuticals have taken a dominant role in medical schools and have affected the teaching of many of our practitioners, which is, he's going to tell you, help contribute to the problems that we have today. Am I pretty much accurate in the statements that I've made about you, Dr. Goldberg?
I think you're very accurate, and with a major thank you for this opportunity to be here today, Hunter. I hope that I can address appropriately some of the things we left out last time. I would actually like to refer any physician anyone for background to look at our first podcast because I think I spent too much time giving the background. But the starting point, why are we here today? Starting with the mistake of chronic fatigue syndrome, evolving to this big mistake of autism. For 35 years, I have watched everybody complain about the medical system, the disaster occurring, our poor health, but sadly, most people have been misled. We've reached a point of misinformation. Say something 7 times on the internet and you think it's true. And I really believe this is the hard part for RFK, who means well. He wants to help fix things that haven't been fixed for 35 years, but he hears things from people that are giving him misinformation and are giving him also approaches that have not worked for 35 years. If you're going to change the medical system mistakes, it starts with hitting the real medical mistakes they're making. I would respectfully say, in children, we are missing chronic viruses, and where the pharma make money off of everything going down, they weren't the ones that made the decisions 35 years ago to ignore these viruses. The people to really go after are the ones on the top who are responsible for these decisions. When you look at these children today, we have variations of ASD, PDD, ADHD, and what we have now done, those in charge are the ones that should be held guilty. We have taken ill children, dysfunctional children, and instead of trying to figure out what's wrong with them, everything is now neurodiversity. And I think in that position, I encourage Secretary Kennedy to attack these questions. How can you call children neurodiverse unless they're totally healthy, mentally and physically, which they are not? Okay?
Dr. Goldberg, I've got a copy of a letter that was sent this year after the confirmation of Secretary Kennedy that you sent to him, and it is. I'm going to just read part of it, if that's all right with you.
Please.
Secretary Kennedy, President Trump was correct in his answer to a reporter regarding autism. With the increasing numbers, there's something wrong. The something wrong is the current assumption that autism is psychological, behavioral, and developmental disorder that is treated as such with no thought of possible underlying medical causation. That's somewhat what you just said. The prevalence of autism has dramatically risen from 1 to 2 cases per 10,000 to now 1 in 36 of our newborn children. And you ask, is this an epidemic? Then you made the statement, when the polio epidemic reached only 1 in 1,500 of children in the 1950s, the medical research community mobilized to find a cure. Scientifically, you cannot have an epidemic without a medical disease component. And I think that's a pretty good analysis of why so many of these naysayers that are on these Senate committees wanting to belittle or attack Secretary Kennedy right now don't know what they're talking about, because we haven't done the medical research that you've done. And then
that's the whole point. Unfortunately, Secretary Kennedy gets himself trapped because people have misled him with information. What he's hearing are a lot of alternative positions, alternative ideas that I have tried to explain to parents, explain to others. You can't fix a medical system's mistake without attacking them on the real mistakes. Examples, what I touched on last time. Their decision to ignore viruses over 35, 40 years ago, chronic herpes-related viruses that I was taught about in medical school. The minute you do that, think what you said. You lead into a chronically ill population. What the medical system has not wanted to acknowledge is these viruses do not behave like an acute strep infection and acute pneumonia where you're sick in a hospital, recover if you're treated correctly. These viruses set up long-term housekeeping in the nuclei of our cells. There's plenty of discussions out there now. They can lead to leukemia, lymphoma, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, other critical diseases. And yet this is where I hope Secretary Kennedy will open the door to attack, because why has no one in the medical system been looking at these? All the literature supports viral immune issues, and they have refused to look at them.
I see in your letter that you have a comment about the role of vaccines in neuroimmune dysfunction. And you state that though the timing of autistic symptoms may correlate with vaccination schedules, it's crucial to understand that vaccines themselves are not the causative factor. You said, think timing, a number of vaccines given at one time. The underlying issue lies in the neuroimmune system, which after repeated insults, numbers of vaccines enters a prolonged autoimmune, neuroimmune shutdown, leading to untoward motor issues with devastating impact on the child and ultimately the family. I had a lunch today with a client and a lady who's a permanent fixture in my life today, that where we were discussing vaccines. And you know, in my generation, I'm one of those 1 in 10,000 when it comes to autism. But also when it comes to vaccines, I may have taken 3 or 4 vaccines as a child when I started school, and one of them was polio. Today, they're vaccinating our children with hundreds of vaccines, and it's out of control. And that you know, we got vaccine after vaccine coming out every year, and that the COVID-19 vaccine has caused a lot of turmoil. And of course, I have my opinions based upon my research. And I mean, I've looked at science that talks about how the adverse effects of COVID-19 vaccines and boosters had less of an efficacy than the unvaccinated people did. So those articles are out there. And so we went nuts during COVID-19. And I blame it on the pharmaceutical community. And people say, well, it's a political thing. Well, you know, I supported President Trump 3 times. I think he was deceived by Anthony Fauci originally, but now he's not, because I'm watching what's coming out in the news, and he says there's going to be an answer to this, and some of the comments that he has said that he knows he was deceived. And of course, I would rather be the one deceived than the deceiver. And so when the deceiver is part of working with the pharmaceutical companies, working with Bill Gates and working with some of the others, then we were hoodwinked on this COVID-19 vaccine. But I'm sorry, I got off the subject.
No. Let's take that.
I'm going to go back to you and let you talk about.
You're hitting 2 subjects.
Timing of the vaccines.
Yeah, you're hitting 2 subjects super important. And let me clarify myself on this. I support and will explain normal childhood vaccines used appropriately. I do not believe are remotely the cause of this problem. But everybody's forgetting. We were trained. You don't give a vaccine to children that are ill. Many of these kids receiving them today are ill. Nobody has checked out in a system of immune activation. Maybe the idea of giving 5, 6, 7 vaccines at one time is really not okay. But far more important, the real vaccine mistakes are not what's being discussed out there. If you attack vaccines, the medical world digs in and knows they saved a lot of lives. The normal vaccines. I'll come back to COVID separately. Yeah. But if you attack the mistakes, Secretary Kennedy could make a lot of headway. Example, there is no justification in life to give a newborn a hepatitis B shot in a nursery. I was trained those first 24, 40 hours of life are the most dangerous to a child. So why are we giving hepatitis B shots to everyone? This is not the pharma. It's the medical system becoming politically correct. There are children that will go home to a dirty household. Instead of doing the right thing and identifying which children might have a risk, the medical system decided we're going to give everybody hepatitis B shots. That is a massive mistake. The second mistake, there's a publication out there, anybody can check this out, showing that Norway or Sweden is giving about half the vaccines we give, have healthy children, and I believe we are giving too many vaccines. We're giving boosters that are not required. If 95% of children take on the first MMR, why have we decided to give everybody a booster at 5 years old? And there's a lot of question about chickenpox being in there. These are the medical issues that should seriously be investigated. Now, flip over to COVID. And this is where I would like to hope Secretary Kennedy, if he's given the right information, can really attack the system. Where we all were worried about this technology, the difference of COVID is completely different than the other vaccine. And we've always been worried. But as I've explained to families, when there are now confirmed reports out of England showing people getting changes years after receiving the COVID vaccine, there's a very frustrating research study out of Japan. They studied 18 million dosages of COVID, and what was their conclusion? The more dosages you got, the sooner you die. And I'm not teasing. So ask the real question that Secretary Kennedy should be asking is, why does a medical system want to advocate a vaccine with given problems? And I believe that gets into the whole problem. These children do not have autism. It is a missed medical disease. And when the medical system has ignored these viruses, you have, as you commented, not just Louisiana, we have a population of ill children, ill adults, and my training says, if you're ill and you get a flu, as I try to explain to parents, we all know this. When you get a flu, there is that moment you wish you could die. That is your immune system going crazy. That's what a flu does. And the difference is, if there's a virus in the background, that flu may kill you. But it doesn't mean it was the flu. It's because the person was ill. I'll use another example of that. These are the issues I really hope Secretary Kennedy starts questioning. If you look at what you're talking about, we have an ill population. The medical system refuses to acknowledge that. So guess what? All you have to do is look at the national labs called Quest and LabCorp. I mentioned this, I believe, last time. When they lower the normal white counts into what I was taught was dangerous, how does that happen? Number one, they're basing it on people coming in. There's no science behind it, but this should prove to the system those coming in today are ill. Many of them have low white counts, often due to viruses. And instead of trying to figure out what that is, they've ignored it. These are the issues Senator Kennedy can really open up. How do we have a missed pandemic, lowered white counts, and no one's saying anything? If you look at our population, it is chronically ill, like you're saying, and that's the answer to many of the issues. We have positive ANAs in many families. ANA sets you up for lupus, for serious diseases. All of these things are out there. And I really encourage Senator Kennedy to start questioning the medical side of this. Okay?
Well, unfortunately, he's being attacked by those who are being influenced by the pharmaceutical community because the pharmaceutical community doesn't like him. Now, I understand that the American Academy of Pediatrics and others too have their statements too. But right now, nobody would convince me, and many others like me, that there's no better person to be seated in that seat today than Bobby Kennedy, simply because he understands that the health of America has been impacted. He's trying to change the food industry. He's trying to remove toxins from our food. He's trying to remove dye. He's trying to remove a lot of things that have impacted the health and the processed foods, the things. I mean, who knows? Maybe the organic food industry will come back. But so much of everything, Dr. Goldberg, and I know is just motivated by money. And so he's doing some really good things. And I hope he listens to the things that you say, because he's working on a solution. And I know I feel pretty much the same when he's talking about the CDC and the NIH, even though I heard the director of the NIH saying that Bobby Kennedy's on the right track. And I know that there's people upset over him changing leadership in the CDC, but I'm not upset at all.
Okay. He's absolutely on the right track.
Yeah.
But he's been misled, and he's missing the real medical issues to attack. Let's take what you just said. I have been livid ever since I found out our CDC, that everyone's trying to defend, lowered childhood developmental milestones. And there's not one word from the Academy of Pediatrics, from the medical system. These are the issues I believe RFK should have hearings on, and they wouldn't be able to cancel him out, because this is a real major medical issue. And the fact that that has occurred after all these years should, in a good medical system, should raise the question, what's wrong with our children? And nobody in the system is saying that. That's where we could win this fight, I believe, if Secretary Kennedy hits them where they're vulnerable. And I would like to believe, based on my experience, even some of the doctors who are frustrated, who were receptive, are now more turned off. If Secretary Kennedy could start the right fights going, I believe there's going to be a lot of doctors supporting him, because they know we're doing the wrong thing here.
Well, your book and in the history of your medical practice and your advocacy for children on this autism is kind of one part of the puzzle that he has to deal with, and I know he has a heart to deal with it. There's so many other parts of it. The second part, of course, is this COVID vaccine and the fact that they won't give it. I can tell you, one of my closest friends is a retired pharmacist, and he was valedictorian of our high school class. And when they first came out with the COVID vaccine, the first thing he told me was, no child should take that vaccine. No child should take that vaccine. And so the battle today is over the fact that budgeting is being pulled back for these mandatory children vaccines, which is borderline criminal. And so I believe it should be pulled back. And so they're mad about the money. And
what I'm concerned about, you're completely right. RFK is completely right. This vaccine should not be out there. But between now and the fall, when COVID's going to come back, he will get blamed for deaths from COVID because the system didn't use a bad vaccine. And what we need to do is take today's video and get the focus to become, what are we missing medically? And why are so many people in this country having trouble with COVID compared to other parts of the world? I think I mentioned last time, when COVID became in the world, less than 1% mortality. That's a normal flu. Yes. So the whole focus should be shifting to figure out, what are we missing, not stay on the path we've been on.
Well, we just picked up the acronym COVID for political sakes. Because, I mean, when you look at the flu statistics and the COVID statistics, they wiped out the flu statistics to make it look like there was COVID. So there was a statistical game played politically with this whole episode of COVID, and it's still being played today. And it's like you started this interview out with the old saying, but if you say something 7 times, they'll believe it.
Right.
If you tell a lie 7 times, they're going to believe it. And so we've been lied to. The American public has been lied to. Now I'm going to give you a little common sense. Hunter Lundy common sense. So in 23, 22, I was campaigning for political office. I was in so many different churches where the pastor was telling people, go to the back and get your free COVID shot. Go to the back and give it your. So some of them were being motivated. And then I can tell you about some really good pastors who really believed, who were really deceived, who now have had health complications themselves because they took vaccines. Myocarditis is all over. Recently, another physician died. I know that he took the vaccine. I had a law partner that took the vaccine and 2 boosters, and her kidneys quit working. And the hospital in Houston wouldn't acknowledge that the vaccine caused it because they mandated it for all their employees or they'd be fired. Well, ultimately, she dies within a couple months of being diagnosed. She was a partner for 31 years. So I'm looking at common sense standpoint. I can name dozens and dozens of people that had adverse consequences. And I know if you go online and you look at what the CDC is publishing, they're going to say, well, myocarditis and pericarditis and a couple of others, the Gills-Barre syndrome, those are some of the adverse consequences of the COVID vaccine. That's hogwash. I mean, it doesn't take, it's hogwash. And so people have been deceived. And so I'm going to stand by Bobby Kennedy to the best of my ability when it comes to this COVID battle. And I'm going to believe he's going to listen to this podcast. And if he hasn't read your letter already, he's going to read it. And he's going to involve the medical community where they can attack the issue.
If he would do that, there are real mistakes, real issues. And very sadly, you have to realize something. When you talk about me training UCLA internship residency, I'm thankful today for a good academic background. And when you look at the mistakes the academic system has made, you can't change people like that with fake science. But if you start to hit them with real science, they're going to lose.
Right.
Okay. And they made the mistakes. So I'm hoping that will be the case. I skipped over, but if you just look at the population today, how many adults and children are walking around with low NK cells? I mentioned this last time. If you have low NK cells, you can't handle a virus correctly. As I said, how many families now, how many children, adults have ANAs? What is our food doing? How many people are stressed? And that's the real problem for our population. COVID's bad, but COVID's not the reason.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, it's an unhealthy population that was affected by a virus that ended up killing many people. And it was senior citizens mostly and people with pre-existing conditions that died. And then the statistical game started. So, I mean, I don't try to judge anybody who made the decision to take the vaccine. I didn't take the vaccine. You know, many of my family, my 93-year-old mother wouldn't take the vaccine and she's still going. And a lot of other people, some that chose to do it, I was totally against the forced. I mean, the craziness. I had a sister-in-law that was a nurse for 40-something years in a local hospital that she took leave for a shoulder injury. When she came back, they let her go because she refused to take the vaccine. The medical community was so
communism.
It was
a medical. This is what we should be going after. What kind of a medical system stops doctors from having different opinions, stops the normal clinical give and take of learning input, and when people in charge started letting doctors go just because they opposed an idea, that was one of the biggest mistakes you could name. Okay, well, it isn't the way for medicine to function.
It was motivated by money. You know, when they created money for putting somebody on
fear. How about fear? I think money plays a role. The farmer will always make money. But you know what? Elise says, I got to be sure to bring up something for you. Your famous words, follow the money. In this case, if you look, I believe you will find out the reason RFK has not been getting the right information is look at the system. Alternative physicians are making fortunes on ideas that have no efficacy, no proven safety, but they're making a lot of money. ABA is thousands of dollars a month every month for these kids. Do you know how many industries have developed to treat autistic children instead of helping them recover? So I believe if you really follow the money, this has become a massive industry instead of child health, good care for children.
Well,
With that, I don't want to forget, because I skipped over our last podcast. I want to definitely go in a little bit for treating these children whenever you want.
all right.
But I want to definitely look at that today.
I'll share this with you. You know, Secretary Kennedy's got courage and he's got fight. You know, so many people are motivated by fear, and I'll tell you, fear stands for false evidence appearing real. That's what fear stands for. And so we just stand on the truth. This is about seeking out the truth. And I think standing on the truth, that yes, he needs guidance from everybody. He needs to listen to the medical community, but he needs to stand his ground. But I want to switch now. Let me read the last part of your letter that you sent to him. You said, with your guidance, the administration has an extraordinary opportunity to address the misconceptions surrounding autism and thus lead the way in redefining treatment. And you're going to talk about treatment, education, and welfare for countless children and families. By reframing the narrative around autism, you can champion a focused medical investigation and research into these conditions. The initiative, rooted in solid science and sound medical principles, will provide real answers and solutions to struggling families. And you request the opportunity to discuss this further. So I know that he's considering this information and other information from good medical scientists and clinicians like yourself. So you fit into a category that most of them don't, Dr. Goldberg. You are both a medical scientist and a clinician, and with 50 years of experience. And so I think you'll be shocked that Secretary Kennedy is going to be making wise decisions, and we can't listen to the noise. And I'm calling what I was hearing from the Senate committee was a bunch of noise and political noise. And so I appreciate your comments. And why don't you tell the audience now what you recommended from the treatment? And I want to thank your wife, Elise, again. But for that, I call it a God appointment that day on that plane. And I want you to tell the audience that she was diagnosed with ADD and that she became your patient. And what were the results of her treatment by you?
Hunter, this is what's so important, is that I come into this as good academics, but I chose clinical medicine. Yeah. So early days of this, I was exposed to the fact that my wife-to-be, ultimately my wife, was ill, fighting this mysterious ailment. And partly as a good physician, I tried to send her to other doctors for help. No answers. Finally, my son said, "Dad, you better help Mom." And that was honestly my trek into all of this. And what I can say, my frustrations that everybody hears, is if you look at the mistakes over 35 years, what stands out? Not biomed ideas, toxins we can't measure, stresses we can't find, but real problems. These viruses are active in women and children. Major medical point, we have babies being born with CMV and HHV6. This is directly a result of the medical system ignoring viruses that should not be left active. So if RFK starts digging into this, the real issues are enormous. But with that background, figuring out what was going on with my wife, it led consistently to immune viral. Now, there's a couple of, I want to go into one major lesson we learned before I go into current treatment. I was desperate to help my wife like any parent out there. I actually turned to a company working with prescription grade amino acids. Huge learning though. If it's not prescription grade, which is the stuff being sold to most families, it's not absorbed. As the world makes fun of us, we have very wealthy urines and stools, but as I learned back then, the body doesn't absorb a lot of things, and if it's not pharmaceutical, it can't go past the liver. But in trying to do that with pharmaceutical products, it was a learning lesson. I could help a little, but I couldn't fix the real problem. So ultimately, it led me in a direction that the underlying pathology is missing: viruses and a chronic immune activation. So everything I'm going to say based on therapy is how do you treat that in a person? And the important thing to understand, go back to one key point: these children are incompatible with whatever Dr. Cantor called autism. Parents have to remember that are listening to this, autism was a psychiatric disorder, and Cantor, who invented the term, distinguished a child with autism from schizophrenia by the comment that the kid with autism was never affectionate. So I immediately, as a doctor, threw out the mistake. These children aren't autism. They have a medical illness with some autistic symptoms. And that can be treated, as I just had come up from a parent who, unfortunately, before coming to this office, heard a whole lot of negatives about me. I really know the politics out there are very not favorable for the children. And the biggest thing she said to my nurses and me was, this is the first office that she's been in that we are honestly talking about recovered children. I believe parents are being lied to. When the general statistics say 90% of children diagnosed on the spectrum have no success, anything that biomed says is working is not really working. So let's look at what I've learned to try to do with this. Number one, and more people are talking about this, think of adults, think of children, active immune system. We are living in a system, whether it's foods, whether it's other things, that we are getting a whole lot of stresses that the response is to activate our system. We are looking at a mistake that we have focused essentially, nutritionally, supplements, trying to fix a medical problem by nutrition. As I thankfully have a whole lot of grandparents acknowledging, there are sadly many children in the world starving. If you look at medical facts, there is zero correlation of those children starving and autism. Autism is not a metabolic or nutritional disorder. It is a serious medical illness. So the first step is always dietary, but dietary, not like throwing things in. You can't not fix this immune system by anything you throw in. The truth is, you take away the stresses. The hardest part of diet is eliminating whatever is setting a child off. And the critical point has become literally dark circles. If a food was okay before, but gives a child a dark circle now, it's not safe. And if you look around, teachers I work with will tell you how many children in their classes are honestly dark circles, space cadets. So this goes into what you started with. We have a completely unhealthy population. But the first step, and I would argue for all those kids, is removing whatever is setting them off. Now, the next step, and thankfully a lot of success, is treating the viruses. Very sadly, with the lack of information, I don't believe in looking for causes of a word mistake. Secretary Kennedy is even looking for the viruses. This is the misinformation of the people around him. If we start looking, when 1.5% of newborns are born with CMV, I cannot begin to tell you how many kids come in here on the spectrum that have CMV. I actually found an old article. Think about this, to the truth of an unhealthy population. Women pass CMV in breast milk. So if a mother is inadvertent...
Tell the audience what CMV means.
Okay. CMV is cytomegalovirus, and I use this constantly because my training in a good medical system was when a baby came out brain damaged, calcifications on the brain, major issues, you did what was called a torch workup, and the C in there stood for CMV, cytomegalovirus, which is one of the herpes viruses out there. Now, when the system goes, 1 to 1.5% of newborns have CMV, but it's asymptomatic. These are the issues Secretary Kennedy could have a field day with. Nobody has a right to call a virus like this asymptomatic unless they have followed those children for 2 or 3 years. And if they did that, it would shock you how many of those kids wind up on the spectrum. But they're winding up on the spectrum because it's a medical illness being caused by the virus, not a developmental disorder. Now, I believe HHV6 does this a lot, and the truth is there's HHV7, HHV8 out there, that all of these viruses have that ability to go to the brain, smolder low grade. But then you come into the key point I think we mentioned last time. If you go to Kanner criteria for autism, the child was never normal. These children are normal for a while. The child was never affectionate. These children are generally affectionate and remain affectionate. And most important, if there's organic disease, you couldn't get a label called autism. And when these children have motor issues, immune abnormalities, inflammation, that's not psychological. That's a real medical problem that those in charge have refused to look at all these years. So the big step is to suppress those viruses if they're present. And that leads to a lot of children starting to feel better, starting to early steps of recovery. Now, go ahead.
I'm going to ask you, I think the audience clearly understands the first thing you look at is the diet. And the diet has to change. You have to remove things when they become symptomatic. So when there is symptomatic, what else do? You explained the misdiagnosis and what's going on in their brain and what's going on in their health care. What else would you do proactively who's somebody who's already been diagnosed like your wife was, Elise, when you met her, to attack this and pull them off the spectrum, get them to where they're not diagnosed autistic?
As I said, my first steps, everything I'm doing is based on my medical training. How do I help that child become healthy again? Then I have a child I can work with and help. So food is critical, antiviral is critical, and with most children, we'll wind up looking at an SSRI with the expectations. I love what Secretary Kennedy said, let's make our children healthy again. The starting point for me with any child I work with is to start to get that child healthy. I can smile partly. Very nice mother recently. Been through everything wrong out there. didn't know which way to turn. As we started working step by step, for the first time ever, she sees that she can work with and help her child. So I believe strongly the important part always is get down to that child, which is a critical part. How do you separate out when a child is behavioral, when a child doesn't feel good? And the more I look at this as pediatrics, I believe those early years are critical. If these children are smart, intelligent, and you're not able to discipline them as you would a normal child, that creates a potential disaster. So what I look for is getting a child healthier, brighter, and what happens? Unlike the concept of a miswired child, which these kids are not, I frequently explain to parents the kid comes back in our world not 7 or 8 years old, but where they left, 2 or 3. The fact that that can happen confirms it's medical. No child could pick up where they left if that wasn't a medical condition. And when you start to get to that state, then the challenge is working with the parents to make the next decisions on a child. When are they behavioral? When are we still dysfunctional? And critically, think how I say this. All parents want language. Well, how do I have an optimistic point about language? Number one, my learning. Unlike what we were being taught, the brain is pliable. I came into this and I was told if a child didn't talk by 5, they were not going to talk. I had children instantly, 15, 20 years old, start to talk by 2 things. The SSRIs helping the temporal lobes of the brain to recover, become functional, where the speech comes from. And then what everybody's missing, you can't recover language in a child without fixing what's called oral motor. If you don't work on the 6-month, 8-month, 10-month, year and a half oral motor skills, I promise you from good training, child cannot recover language properly. And this is now a major part of our system. When I point parents, ask them to get a speech pathologist to help them, nobody out there is helping. We've reached a stage. I think this is the big thing for Secretary Kennedy to go after. Since when do we write off children? Since when do we not prioritize recovering a child?
Dr. Goldberg, I mean, I'm about out of time, but I mean, your comments have been so beneficial to the public today. And
Thank you.
I have the confidence that Secretary Kennedy is going to pay attention and listen. And he's and listening to people like you who are part of the medical profession. They're so important. I know you've testified before Congress before. I hope that, again, that you will get an opportunity to do that again so you can tell the story. And I want to encourage every listener today, if they haven't read The Myth of Autism, written by Dr. Goldberg, along with his spouse, Elise Goldberg, and the foreword written by Dr. Ishmael Mina, to go get the book and read it. And read the book. And I know we diverted a little bit to talk about COVID, but I think it's such an important topic for today that you've helped the listener understand too the fallacies of vaccinations. Neither one of us are anti-vaccinations, but we're paying attention to know who's at risk and who's not at risk and who should get it and who should not. And you've educated the public, especially the pediatricians, about recognizing children that have viruses when they should be vaccinated and not vaccinated. And there's a lot of unnecessary medicine that's going on today, and wrong medicine. And so I can't thank you enough. Again, I can't thank your wife enough for introducing me to you. And we'll pick up on this later. I'm just out of time, and so but I can assure you, the secretary, if he hasn't seen your letter, he will see your letter.
I have a plan for that because I really believe the good will win if we make the right fight. Okay.
Well, we're winning right now. We just need to keep winning. Thank you, and God bless, Dr. Goodman.
Thank you so much. And everybody listening to this, I hope this really helps to open the doors to the right problems. I thank you more than I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you.